have such sights to show you.
We're Poppin the Scary horror podcast here. I'm your host Coale, and with me as always I have my good friend and co-host Aaron.
Hey!
Heyo!
We are live on location.
Yes, we are. We are outside the movie theater right now, just chilling in the car because it's still a little hot outside.
It's a high of 105 today.
And you know what I have to say about that, Aaron?
Nope.
Nope. You're dang right. So, I know we've mentioned Jordan Peele on our episodes quite a bit.
Yeah.
Haven't really dived into it, but without getting too heavily into his previous films, since we may one of these days review them, what were your thoughts on Get Out and Us?
My quick and dirty review. I liked Get Out a lot. It's a great movie. And Us was a little underwhelming when compared to the original Get Out, but it was fun. It seemed like it almost turned into more of a apocalypse movie than a horror movie.
You know what? Yeah, no, I 100% I agree with everything you just said, because like whenever Get Out came out, you know, everyone was hyping it up, and then I went to go watch it, and I was like, wow, it lived up to the hype. It hit the mark. But Us, like, I heard the same acclamations for, and then I watched it, and stylistically it looks cool. Like, I love the golden scissors, like the doppelgangers and red jumpsuits, but whenever it came to the overall story it was telling, there were some things I liked, but just kind of towards the end it was underwhelming.
And I mean, without getting too dirty into the reviews, but just, I was thinking about Us the other day. I think the thing that disappointed me is that Us is in parts a little more derivative, and Get Out was just so original. It's just something, it's a concept we hadn't seen before, and like the tension, you know. It was something that Jordan Peele does really well. Is, you know, every time he has a cast, it's a majority black cast. It's focused on the black experience. That was somewhat true for Us, but it was definitely true for Get Out. And just based on the trailer I've seen for this movie, it seems like it's true for Nope too. So that's something interesting that we have, you know, because we've seen a lot of horror movies on this podcast, and they're almost always entirely white people and white casts. So, you know, I hope we reach a point where we don't have to mention that, you know, wow, it's cool that this is all black people, but it's cool that this is a movie that these are always about the black experience of black families.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Jordan Peele, I think he's just a talented guy overall. I mean, obviously his work with Keegan-Michael Key, like, he has the humor, and then Get Out just proved that he also knows how to handle the horror genre as well. And I feel like he's a breath of fresh air for the horror genre. And so I think, again, just his perspective, especially, again, like you mentioned, incorporating majority black cast, I think is incredible just to have that sort of film experience. And as for the trailer, I've seen the trailer once, but in all honesty, I've been trying to avoid it. So I know almost next to nothing. I know we talked a little bit, but it has the returning actor from Get Out coming back in. And
his name's Daniel.
Yeah.
I can't remember how to pronounce his last name, nor do I even really see it in my head, but it's Danny Boy.
Yes, and he was gonna Get Out, so I'm really curious to see how he does in Nope. And it's also really exciting because this is our very first movie theater experience for the podcast.
Let's all go to the movies. Let's all go to the movies. We switched it up on each other.
I know. We totally rehearsed it. Yeah. Absolutely rehearsed it. So
we're gonna get some popcorn.
Yeah, we're gonna get some popcorn,
get
some juice. I don't know about the beverages there, you know, because it's obviously you can't smuggle outside beverages.
Are you calling me an alcoholic?
No, me.
Because I drank before I came.
Oh, dang. You got prepared. You got prepared for Nope. Dadgum, I'm slacking today. So, yeah, Aaron and I are going to head to the movie theater now, and we'll catch you all later after we see our feature presentation of Nope. Nope. So much Nope.
Never, not in a million years, absolutely not. No way, Jose, no chance, Lance, yet, negatory, nah, and of course my own personal favorite of all time, man falling off of a cliff. No!
And so we have returned from the movie theaters back to our little studio we have set up, totally not my computer office area whatsoever that we always record in.
It's a studio. Hey, some people record in a closet, so.
Yeah, no, yeah. Fortunately, it's a little less claustrophobic than that.
Yeah, we're glad to be out of the closet.
Yeah, absolutely. Just let it be on the record that Aaron and I are out of the closet.
Yeah, and into the computer room.
Yes.
That is how we sexually identify.
Absolutely, yeah. So, yeah, speaking of identifications, how about we talk about some unidentified flying objects, or UPAs?
Oh, that was a transition and a movie reference.
Oh,
UPAs, whoa. Not UFOs anymore.
Yeah, with Nope, like I said before, I didn't really have any expectations on what to expect.
Yeah.
I knew that it was like a phenomenon sort of film.
Yeah, there was like a mystery element, yeah.
But that was about it, and I didn't really look at anything else. But after watching the film, I think I got what I expected while also getting things I totally did not expect to be in this film whatsoever.
Right, yeah. I mean, obviously there's a lot of characteristics in this film that feel very Jordan Peele, but with the great thing about Jordan Peele is he explores something a little different every time. You're not getting the same movie over and over, and this was like, hey, what if we focus on some people that do horses for movies and cool alien phenomena kind of deal.
Yeah, and I can't imagine the amount of pressure Jordan Peele probably has about making these films, because Get Out was like his big directorial debut, right? And that was a huge smash hit, like just exploded, and for good reason. And then with Us, like, while we both kind of agree that we weren't as crazy about Us as we were Get Out, everyone else loved it a ton from what I got the general consensus of. And so with this third film, again, just I can't imagine the amount of weight and pressure he has, because everyone's eyes are on him, and especially those that are like, I don't know. I feel like as quickly as some people are to put people up on pedestals, they are quickly to be the ones to tear down that person on the pedestal.
Sure.
So I think, overall, it seems like the reception of the film has been fairly positive. And just without getting into too much nitty gritty, I think, for me personally, I think I agree with the audience. I feel like this is also another great hit.
Yeah, it's a good film.
But I will mention a side tangent. Did you hear about what happened on Twitter?
What happened on Twitter?
Well, everything happens on Twitter, so that's a huge save. It's like, did you hear what happened today?
You mean Arnold Schwarzenegger farting on a woman's face 20 years ago?
Oh my god.
That was a headline.
Oh my god.
That was a Twitter moment.
I thought I was having like a heat stroke reading that. I had the worst time comprehending that, but I guess this one guy on Twitter, I can't think of this dude, but he was like talking about Nope, and he's like, a third smash hit for a horror director. Name anybody else that's ever done that before. And Jordan Peele actually responded and said, please don't. He just like, don't. And so it actually, that person got a lot of heat. And Jordan Peele was like pretty respectable towards the tweeter and said like, look, I appreciate the praise, but no, just don't.
Just shut the fuck up, dude.
Yeah, because, I know that Jordan Peele is a massive horror fan of, like, John Carpenter especially, who has had plenty of hits. And so I think Jordan Peele just appreciates being praised, but I think he also is like, don't get me too high on my horse.
Right.
But, no, but even that said, I feel like this film is definitely a positive overall. I know you kind of talked about the plot already, how it focuses on this family that lends horses to like Hollywood production commercials. It's like rent a horse. And towards the beginning of the film, they're hit with this incident to where they're really struggling to kind of make ends meet. And so with them like slowly having their business go downwards, it's then whenever the weird phenomenons just keep happening to this family, and they're trying to decide exactly what to do, what's going on,
right,
and like what are they going to do now.
right.
Yeah, so
and big credit to Mr. Peele. Just like with any good mystery film, I feel like a lot do this, but like, you know, it's hard to always nail it. The phenomena don't really seem related from the perspective of the family until, of course, later on you're like, oh, okay, that's what ties it all together. It's this thing that's happening. But yeah, it's like just weird happenings. Like, okay.
Yeah, it's very strange, and big kudos, I guess, to Jordan, which again, it seemed like he had pretty big control of this film, because I think it showed him being the sole writer, director, and producer of the film towards the beginning opening credits, just having all three, which is more rare nowadays, because it seems like there's always, like, even if it's like a Spielberg production, there's like other people involved, so it's pretty crazy to see that. But I feel like Jordan definitely holds his cards close to his chest on what exactly the mystery is, and doesn't give too much away. There's definitely some strange incidents that keeps us intrigued and wanting to learn more, but even though I thought I knew where it was going, he still managed to surprise me about how it was presented.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. Until, I mean, in all of his movies, he sort of does that, where he keeps the mystery compacted in the first half. But then I do think he does, like, pretty much lay it out in all of his movies at the end. He's like, and here's what was happening. Yeah. Not necessarily, like, you know, all the nitty gritty, like, let me go back in time to win this, you know? Like,
yeah.
This is where this came. But they were like, I mean, he shows you. He bears all. Right?
Yeah.
You know, at the end.
I am curious about the plot itself, which I'm not sure if we should introduce the characters, because I feel like the plot is so heavy-handed with so many stuff. I feel like you need to know the characters before we dive into kind of talking about the plot, because
I'm
okay.
I mean, I think the characters, and this is probably something I'll talk about when we start talking about but like, I think they're a lot better developed than you see in most horror movies.
No, I 100% agree with that statement. And in fact, my wife actually went with us to the movie, and she politely declined being on this podcast. But she was talking about how much she really enjoyed the characters, which again, you don't really see too much in horror. Mostly it's kind of like the monster that's the star of the show. And, you know, like, I have no problem with the monster being part of the show. I mean, that's why I love the horror genre. But it is kind of refreshing to get characters that, again, you want to see succeed.
Right. That's something that I feel like is like, right, so simple on paper, but you really don't see it all that often, even with these big, massive success movies, because it's like, shouldn't we care about the people before we start seeing their lives in danger? Like, wouldn't that make it more suspenseful? And that's something that this film does really well.
I will ask this, because in all honesty, I don't know where to put this question, but I'm very curious, especially since how perceptive you've been to the messages that Jordan Peele has put in his movies. Did you feel like you got a message from this film? Because I know you're better at spotting stuff sometimes than I am, even.
I mean, I feel like with all of... Jordan Peele's a director that will layer things in. I mean, I think there are a lot of messages you can take from any movie. I mean, what is a plot or story, but messages. But if you're talking about, like, more like activism focused or those sorts of things, I mean, what... I feel like what Jordan Peele is doing as a director is not... He's still doing the same kind of style of Get Out, which was about the Black experience. And every movie that he's done has been about the Black experience, which, of course, like any human experience, is not a monolith. He's doing a variety of characters. But this is another Black family dynamic, and it's a unique one. And it's like, okay, these are like Black cowboys, which is cool, you know? And it's not Little Nas X, you know? It's a different Black cow. These, you know, and so they're showing an aspect of like rural country Black life, but like next to Hollywood, very ingrained with a very, you know, California feel. So, I mean, yeah, if you're talking about messages like that, I don't think there's a lot that's like overt, but it's, I think Jordan Peele does, man, I hate to just talk on this topic, like just so bold-faced as a white person, but Jordan Peele does diversity the way I feel like diversity should be, where it's natural and it's like here's a black experience, and it doesn't have to be exactly what you think of as the black experience, and it's just like bam, and like there's it's representation without being ham-fisted about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It definitely doesn't feel like pretentious at all. Like you feel like a lot of films try to be. I feel like he's more down to earth than just telling it like it is.
It's just like imagine your average, popular pop culture, but not super celebrated television show, and it's just like, here's two gay people, and the whole story is about their gay struggle, and it's like, that's awesome, except the whole plot of this movie is about vampires or something, so why are we diving into this part?
Exactly.
So you see that a lot where like people try to shoehorn in diversity, but like this is just about a black experience, and it focuses on black people, and it's cool to see a movie where it's like, the focus of the movie is obviously the monsters and what's happening to these people or whatever, but it focuses on their lives as a movie should. It should develop a character. It should show a human experience, and then what's going on in their lives. And it just so happens to be a science fiction, fantasy, horror kind of genre movie, but that doesn't mean that we're not showing a unique aspect of the human experience instead of a bunch of white people that live in the Northeast, which is what most of horror movies are. And also the extent to which the characters are developed. Like, these are cool characters. We have like the aspiring young actress, the cowboy that's trying to put on the shoes, the very large shoes of his father, all living under a legacy of being, some of the first, as they see it, some of the first Hollywood stars, but that have been buried and ignored by history, and they're, literally secluded out on this little ranch on the outskirts of Hollywood. So, like, living up to legacy is a theme, having eyes on you is a theme, right? Even literally, when we talk more about the monster, having eyes, like eyes and vision is not just about the monster, it's about them and the attention that they, especially the younger girl Emerald feels like they deserve, versus the attention that OJ is trying to avoid. He's trying to avoid eye contact, right? There's little themes like that I feel like we can dive into a little bit more when we get into spoiler territory, like messages like that. But yeah, ultimately, I just think the surface level thing that I feel like everybody should easily take away is like, this is a cool movie about, it's a big summer blockbuster. It's a big summer blockbuster that shows the black experience with black leads, which is cool. You don't always see that in movies, and it does it in sort of a natural way where you don't feel like, okay, I'm listening to a after school special. You know what I mean? I'm in the real experience here.
No, I absolutely agree with all your points, and the only reason why I mentioned that is because, like, you talk about Jordan's last few films, and they do have kind of like, I feel like, a bigger message that he's trying to deliver. But this one, I feel like he doesn't have a message, but it's not a bad thing. I feel like, again, he's just trying to tell a really good story. And it's not the fact that the other films weren't good stories by any means, but I was just trying to think, because, again, Get Out was like a huge experience again, and just had so many layers. And then with Us, I felt like they did have a lot of layers, but it got a little lost in translation, I feel like. And this film, there's definitely like a lot to take away, but I didn't feel like it was an experience like of him being like, oh, big, like, oh, this represents this represents that. Instead, it was just, again, focusing on a black family just trying to do their best with the situation that they're currently in, and I think that's awesome. Because I feel happy for Jordan, because I feel like whenever you have an outstanding hit and it's like big on like both the artsy and film level, that you're expected just to churn out the same things. So with Nope coming out, I feel like it's honestly kind of a breath of fresh air, and I honestly feel like his whole intention is, I have this really cool idea for this movie, this like phenomenon, and the way to tackle this sort of phenomenon. So because of that, I was like, man, that must have been kind of hard for Jordan to do, just to, because I'm sure he felt like pressure again to try to put out something again that people are able to dive in. And again, like you mentioned, there are like things to take away, but I don't think whenever it comes to like humanity depth there, it's probably the most shallow of the films, but that's not a bad thing against it.
Yeah, I guess the way I would put it in a less rambly way than that whole long ramble I just did is something like Get Out was overtly about race relations, right? That was the point of the plot and everything, and that's why it was so revolutionary. And I feel like, there's a lot of pressure and expectation on him to have sort of films in that same line, but of course he's like, I want to do something different every time, you know? But those same messages and ideas and, you know, realities are portrayed here. It's just not, race relations isn't the point of this film, you know what I mean? It's just I mean, it's part of the film because it's part of the human experience as we deal with other people. But
and like we mentioned before, like Jordan has been very apparent and clear that he is a massive fan of horror, so for him I feel like he's just able to churn out these films that are focusing on different aspects of horror. Like the first film focuses on real life horror. Like I feel like, you know, just speaking wise, there is like a fantastical element, but it's more grounded in real life.
Of course.
The second one, I feel like it kind of flips opposite, and it's more of a fantastical horror, with
that just so
real
happens to have like a black family at the center.
Yes, for sure. And then the third film, I feel like is just the unknown horrors. So I felt like overall, I think it's pretty dadgum impressive that he's able to churn out 3 films back to back to back, and that they're all pretty dang good.
And they're scary and they're suspenseful, and they all focus on a different source of fear.
And so I'm that's why I was glad to have you like here, because again, whenever it came to analyzing the film, I was like, I don't know how deep this film's going to go.
And I will say just something that you can notice at a surface level without even watching the movie, just knowing the name of it is Nope. You kind of get an idea of like, this is a horror movie starring black people, and you get those moments a few times where like in a white person movie, whenever they see the fucking killer and they're in the basement, they're like, well, let me just go down there and check it out, you know? Like, there's not that fucking innate fear and distrust that might be more prevalent in something like a black community. And in the black community, there's times where they see the monster and the main characters are just like, nope. I'm not going in there, because that's a more natural and black community response to a source of fear. It's like, not doing that.
No, I absolutely have to 100% agree. I feel like when it comes to the characters being confronted by this horrible, horrific thing, I absolutely love the response they have, because they're overtly afraid, but it's not like Scream Queen level of like wailing and freaking out, which again is understandable, but it's a breath of fresh air just to see someone just look at something and be like, nope. And so because of that, I feel like the film's title is very, very well placed, because whenever I heard it, I'm like, okay, there has to be a reason why he chose nope as a word. Again, like, you know, that each title has been very deliberate, and I feel like naming a film can be one of the hardest things. And so with this film, you know, after watching it, I'm like, you know what? I totally agree. Nope. It's
also one of those, you know, whenever you hear the title of the movie, like in Get Out is a great example. Whenever you hear Get Out for the first time, you're like, that's the title. You're doing like the Leo pointing at the screen, like, oh, he said it. In this movie, you could do that like 25 times. He said it.
I know there's a lot more to unpack with the story and where it goes, and I know we've already talked about it a little bit, but we'll go ahead and just jump towards the characters that we see in the film. So you mentioned OJ, which is played by Daniel Kaluuya. And I made sure to listen to a video to pronounce the last name correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I was gonna guess Kaluuya.
Yeah, it's like a mix of Kaluuya and Hallelujah. You know, Kaluuya.
And that's what it's like experiencing his acting too.
And I thought he was absolutely great in Get Out. He nails the relax vibe so much.
He's like he's a little more reserved, and he's a little more steady-headed, you know what I mean? Which I just think is awesome in a horror movie, instead of just having this screaming, you know, he's just like, okay, you know, I got to deal with this now, and this is scary, but he's having a human reaction, but it's not the same, you know, like, I'm just gonna run and trip over myself and way. He's like, he's very confident, but also very like, just held back sort of vibe.
Well, and I think what's great is that, I think one of the things you have a problem with is you ever see an actor and you don't recognize them as the character, but as the actor instead. I felt that Daniel was able to make me think I was staring at a different actor as opposed to Get Out, because he responds to fear differently in both films, which I think is fantastic. Because in Get Out, I mean, he's very realistic with like being just mentally and physically freaked out and wigged out with all of the insanity that's going on around him. And this one, he's just more reserved, but you could definitely tell he's still afraid. It's just, and he's the one character you'll hear him utter the title multiple times, but he does it just so believably and so wonderfully. And so I feel like for being a man of like few words, I feel like he speaks like very loudly with his acting overall. And so he was definitely super enjoyable to watch. I thought he absolutely killed this role.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see him in a lot of things, not just Get Out in this, but also like he was in Black Mirror and stuff. He's in these sorts of like horror sort of realmed experiences a lot, and he kind of gives, I don't want to say gives the same performance because that's selling him short. He kind of plays the similar characters in all these things, but yeah, it's those little differences and details that you can really see baked into his characters that keeps you from feeling, like, okay, well, this is another Daniel Kaluuya performance, just the same thing again. It's like he brings something a little bit different every time, and it always is like, that's a cool character. I like that.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with your statement there. And talking about his sister, played by Keke Palmer, I actually didn't know too much about her. My wife was really excited to see her because I guess she was like in, that one Nickelodeon show I'm trying to think of. It's like Victoria VP or something like that. I'm trying to think. Anyways, she was super excited to see her because of that. She was in that in Coale and the Bee.
Yeah. The Spelling Bee movie.
Yeah, and so I feel like she was a believable and great addition to the cast to offset Daniel's performance. Because Daniel's like quiet, reserved, definitely not salesman-y, as opposed to her, where she is super duper charismatic, salesman-y, flaky, just it's pretty much the yin to the yang, I feel like.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like her performance as Emerald was definitely top notch as well. And I feel like, again, characters like her that are just like clearly irresponsible and kind of go with the wind can drive me crazy, but I feel like she does it in a way to where you feel like she does genuinely care about OJ.
And there are definitely times where she like kind of messes up, you know what I mean? And but it's not like one of those characters where, like whenever we were talking about
Jerry in House of a Thousand Corpses.
Yeah, where you're just like, all right, how many fuck ups can you have, dude? Like like she's one of those people that like, okay, and she like, you can see her learn throughout and like, change as a character, which is awesome because you don't often even get to see that in horror movies a lot because they die too soon or whatever. But you get to see her shift her character in ways, which is cool.
No, and so I feel like for Jordan to write a character like that and be successful, again, to not make it like irritable and everything else, because this character could have been written so poorly that I just absolutely couldn't stand the character. But I did care about the character. I might have liked OJ as a character a little bit more, but again, it's not like, it's just more like personal taste at that point there. But she still does an absolute phenomenal job as doing her role. Sorry, the heat got to my brain and shut it off there temporarily.
It is a little warm.
Yeah, just a little bit anyhow. But yeah, I feel like both characters absolutely like were phenomenal, and the actors killed it in their roles. Yeah. So again, major kudos to the casting of them because both of them were absolutely believable. I didn't feel like they were playing characters.
And those are the big two, but there are a few other supporting characters that are definitely worth a mention.
One, I was surprised. I thought it was going to be a throwaway joke, but it was Angel Torres, played by Brendan Pereira.
Yeah. The Fry's Electronics employee.
Yes, I thought he was going to be like just a background character, but the way they incorporate it is like so ingenious. I feel like it was done just so naturally and believably, because you ever see like those films whenever like a group is assembling together and it's like that one individual, that Aragorn in the corner with the hood smoking a pipe sort of individual. Like, no, Angel just blend into the background, and so the way he's weaved into the story, it's great. I thought another thing that obviously everyone knows Jordan Peele from is Key and Peele, you know, with the sketches they did. And I think between the 3 films, this is probably the funniest. I would probably say. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of quips.
Yeah.
I feel it's like, maybe it's because, and we can talk about it later, I feel like the horror isn't as transparent as much as the other 2 films, where there's always that like looming thing.
I do feel like this one had more opportunity for like situational comedy. You know what I mean? There was a lot of humor in just like sort of the, you know, scenes they found themselves in, and like the way things ended up getting set up, versus something like Get Out, which there was, you know, potential for comedy there, but they're kind of stuck in one location, you know what I mean? And most comedy in that movie was put on like the comic relief character, best friend guy or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
This one, they all say funny things, and a lot of it's because, you know, it's a brother and a sister that are giving each other shit, and it's a Fry's employee that's like weaseling his way into this situation, and it's, you know, and they have all these even these flashback moments, which are pretty disturbing in times, but also are kind of funny because it involves a chimpanzee, and like, why wouldn't that be funny?
Oh my gosh, yeah, we'll have to talk about that. We'll have to talk about that in spoilers, because I don't think there's any way about it.
It's the very first scene in the movie, but I agree with you. It is kind of pivotal, so because they keep going back to it, but
I thought the inclusion of Angel was well needed and felt organic to the story, and I felt like, you know, it was a great inclusion to tell the story they were trying to tell, that it didn't feel like ham-fisted, kind of like, oh, what a coincidence, you know?
Right.
I feel like, again, it just happens so naturally throughout the film. And one other person I will want to talk about right now, actually, why not?
Yeah,
you know,
let's do it.
Whip it up. We'll do it live. Is I was very surprised by this, because I didn't know this actor was going to be in there, but Keith David was in there as OJ Sr.
Oh,
and so, do you know who Keith David is?
He looked familiar, but I couldn't place what he was from.
So he is actually from a John Carpenter film, The Thing, the remake of the Thing from the Other World. So he's in that. So I imagine that was like a big dream casting for Jordan, because he's a big fan of John Carpenter. But also, I also know him because he's a very prolific voice actor. Like, he's done the voice of Spawn, the comic book series that was adapted to TV and other video games. But he was also the voice of Dr. Facilier in The Princess and the Frog, which that's pretty much my favorite aspect of that film is Keith David's performance. He has that deep resonating voice. And so it was really cool to see him. The only thing I will say is that I wish I could have seen him do more in the film. That was kind of the disappointing thing, but I feel like for what he's given, he tries to make the most out of it. But then again, I think it's just a fanboy in me kind of being like, oh my god, that's Keith David!
Ooh, what's up?
Yeah, and I had to like look at the opening credits to confirm it was, because I heard it, I'm like, that sounds like Keith David. And then it's like, and Keith David. I'm like, oh my god, it's Keith David!
Yeah.
But I have to give like shout outs and nods to that, and major kudos for Jordan being able to cast him. But like I said, I wish that we had gotten to know him just a tiny bit more. But I feel like whenever you have a big group of characters and a big story you're trying to tell, you have to kind of pick and choose your battles.
And I definitely think, you know, from like a plot character wise, he served his purpose, because, you know, it was sort of about the experience like after his impact, you know what I mean, and like how that impacted the characters that we're seeing mostly in the film. So it was, I mean, I feel like for that reason, but I can definitely understand having like a, you know, like an actor that you really like and recognize and be like, oh.
Yeah, but I will mention another big name, which I see you're also looking at, is Steven Yeun.
Because speaking of voice acting, you know, he's the voice of Mark in Invincible. Because I kept on like hearing his voice, and I was like, he sounds
Oh
familiar.
yeah. He's
he
the
plays
voice of Mark.
Yeah, he's the main character in Invincible. If you guys seen that cartoon superhero show.
Yeah, he's also pretty good, and he was also known for playing Glenn in the Walking Dead series, which I thought he was like really great at doing. I didn't like love his character, but I blame that more on the show's writing than anything else. So seeing Steven Yeun kind of like, again, after he left the show, started going for more things such as Invincible, it's great to see and refreshing, because I feel like sometimes actors that make it big in one TV series try to make it big outside and then just kind of fizzle out, which is sad to see. But I'm glad Steven Yeun was able to be in this production. And I feel like his character is pretty great.
I like it a lot.
I felt like he gave such a different performance to where, again, I don't feel like, oh, it's just Steven Yeun doing whatever. But I felt like for the character Jordan had in mind for him, I felt like he did a very excellent job of being someone who's confident, but kind of it's more of a facade than anything else.
Right. And I just love the way that, because there is a sort of distinct like past narrative that gets woven in over usually through these little flashbacks or whatever that his character is central to, and it has nothing to do with the rest of the cast really. And they keep like bringing it, and so it's really nice to see his modern day relationship to this brother sister family, and then like how it's tied to the current conflict and how the past conflict also ties into that. I mean, it's just really good job at all these strings that are connected in different places, and getting to explore that throughout the progress of the movie.
Yeah, because I definitely feel like it's very natural, because like the way they are able to meet up is the fact that OJ has to end up selling like some of the horses to make ends meet to Jupe.
And their properties are also like right next to each other. Yeah.
So it makes total perfect sense. And I am curious though, and we'll probably talk more about it in spoilers, since like the backstory is kind of revealed just a tiny bit more, even though I felt like we kind of got the idea on his backstory. But I'm very curious as to what made Jordan want to write that in. So that was another thing that I was like, man, I don't know if I'm missing like something he's trying to say, or just a concept. So
I mean, like, I get, it's one of those things that like I didn't really get it till the end when they're really tackling the conflict head on, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get it, because it all has sort of the same, there's a theme throughout with the horses, with the chimpanzee incident that I mentioned earlier in the podcast, and even in the end there with sort of I don't even know how to say this without spoiling too much, but just a sort of I'll just say that there's a tie-in with all those things, and I'll save it for spoilers. But
yeah, I also felt like the introduction on like when Jupe is able to tell both OJ and his sister about what exactly happened with that TV show, I felt like was fairly organic, because I feel like, again, like a character like OJ would never ask anything about anything whatsoever. He's just like straight down to business there. But whenever Emerald is like asking questions about it, and Jupe's like, well, why don't I tell you? I've been doing business with y'all for a little bit.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I get these questions all the time.
Yeah, and the way he chose to tell the backstory, I feel like is very interesting, that he didn't just tell it straight. So I thought that was very unique, almost, and again, it kind of matches his way of trying to cope with the incident that occurred.
Because it's a traumatic incident, but the way he presents it to people is like, oh yeah, here's this extra novelty that I have in this weird little theme park I have, of course this is part of my life. Here, there's like a little shrine to it and everything, and it's like, to have a incident like a shrine to probably the most traumatic moment in your life is like, and to just show it off for novelty, for kicks and stuff. It's like, it's just, it's such a weird, interesting Hollywood way to deal with things. But.
No, I totally agree with that. I will ask one thing with this one character. This character right here, do you think we should mention him? Or?
A quick mention is fine. I don't think we need to dote on him. There's like a filmmaker that's part of this too.
Named Antlers Holst. Played by Michael Wincott, and I feel like he's like the Anthony Bourdain of filmmaking. He's got a
really deep voice, and he's like, very like poetic and dark,
And I feel like his inclusion, again, I feel like that was Jordan's way of also being able to channel some of his love of cinema into it. And I feel like,
and also,
again,
like, in a way that kind of pokes fun of it, because I feel like he was a bit of like a caricature,
yes, definitely. But also, I did notice a bit of Jordan kind of putting out his love of film, because they mentioned like one of the first films produced is like the jockey riding the horse that Emerald is able to tell the group whenever they bring the horse over to the studio. So I felt like, again, the way that it was done is like, I feel like just both a satisfactory thing for Jordan just to be like, film nerd about everything, which again, we're not making fun of because I'm a big film nerd. It's always Aaron, and all works out. But I feel like just him being able to put in stuff like that, be it through characters or narratives, is definitely cool. Yeah. I will say this, one thing I forgot to mention about whenever it comes to the jokes. One of my favorite jokes is at the very beginning of the film, whenever OJ goes to the studio and there's like, just all of the studio execs like wandering around, and they're just so up their own bums that they're just ignoring everything, and OJ just has to kind of endure everything. And I love the actress that just comes up and says like, "Oh, so your name's OJ?" And he's like, "Yeah." Huh. Like it was
just a little subtle, like
I just love that. I just feel like that's just brilliant writing on Jordan's bit, just again to throw in a joke like that. So I had to give like a quickie thing, and I'm like, I don't know how to interject this. So I'm gonna say I like this one joke.
I mean, it's no secret that Hollywood loves making movies about Hollywood, but I love that this movie just like kind of takes place adjacent to Hollywood. You get little glimpses like that in it, and it's not self-flating. It's like the complete opposite, because I feel like a lot of movies about Hollywood are just like, here's the Hollywood story, song and dance, it's La La Land or whatever. Which I love La La Land, but at the same time, it's like, okay, stop sucking your own dick. You literally made that movie too. Like,
yes, exactly.
But this one is just like, you see it from Otis's perspective. You see it from OJ's perspective, and it's just like, I'm around these people. These are my people. I like horses better. Like
yes, exactly. You feel like he's a fish out of water, which again, I feel like is just a natural way, because again of everything they have to kind of deal with in their current situation. And there's a lot of stuff this film does story-wise that if you had told me like the aftermath of certain situations, I would be kind of very confused and curious on how it could happen.
Sure.
So I'm very eager to discuss that more in the spoiler territory. One other thing I will say that I felt like was very effective is the lack of music. There was I felt like, especially because we watched this in Dolby Cinema, which is known for like its surround sound, but just hearing like the wind whistling through and just the noises around whenever they're not able to see a lot of stuff, I felt like was really well done. And anytime they did incorporate music, I did like the way they were to have the music be affected and add more to the atmosphere.
It was, usually whenever they had music in, it was being played from something in the scene, you know what I mean? It was part of what the characters were also listening to, not just the audience. And then that getting warped and affected along with the other things in their lives being warped, affected was just a cool way to go about it. It was part of it was more of part of the sound design instead of just the background music.
And I also love that Jordan isn't afraid to let the film be silent at a lot of moments, and especially like whenever it just shows like OJ just hanging out in his like pasture he has. Like, I love the location they had, and that it takes place mostly during the daytime, which again is a lot more rare for films to do. I know there's been some exceptions where they are willing to show a lot of horrific stuff during the day. So it was very interesting, and there's a lot of, I feel like, very ingenious, iconic stuff that Jordan throws into the film later on that I was like, man, that's such a cool idea.
He definitely sets up, he puts in like little trail of breadcrumbs and then you run back over them, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
He sets up these little things. He's really good at that, where it's like, okay, what you thought was just a funny moment earlier in the film, it's like, no, that's relevant now, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I was curious about some of the things they showed and whether it either had like significance to it, whether it is through like, again, like, message behind there, or if it's just like a device that's going to be used later. So it was very interesting to take that all in. So yeah, is there anything else you wanted to talk about before I get into the spoileronies?
No, I think we should swan dive right in.
Okay, dadgum, we're just taking a dive right into the film. So, Aaron, before we take that dive, I feel like people already have a consensus on how we feel about it, but just to confirm it all, seal the deal, what would you rate Nope?
Yeah, we've definitely talked about this film and the kinds of things that we like. There's only really a few little minor here or there kind of things that I picked up on that I was like, maybe they could have done that a little bit different. Or, maybe it was a little slow in this part or something like that. But overall, good movie. Yeah, I guess for reasons that I can explain later in spoilers, I'll take like a little tiny percentage points off here and there for a couple things. So it's not like a perfect score, but I really liked this movie. I thought the performances were fantastic. I thought the sound design was good. I thought the monster was interesting, not that scary, honestly, but they did a good job of tackling challenges that are traditionally challenging in horror movies, like making things scary during the day, and those sorts of things. So overall, I think I'd give this movie like an 8. Like this is a pretty solid. It is kind of a summer blockbuster. It is a little pop culture in parts, but there's also a lot of really deep layers, and it's something that I feel like if we went back and watched again, you pick up on even more stuff. It's one of those. I think it has a rewatch value of things and themes and characters and narratives that are woven together. It's not just a straight story with here's the killer guy coming to kill you and he kills some people and then they trump him in the end. Congratulations. Really creative narrative, great characters. I love a unique perspective. Please stop making horror movies in Connecticut or whatever the fuck with some babysitters. Halloween was great, but stop making that movie again.
We watched a trailer for Halloween Ends, which already, like, if it tells you anything, Aaron wasn't even a fan of the original one. So the remake later, which I'm not even like super crazy about. My wife loves them to death, and maybe eventually, God willing or God unwilling, hopefully, we will get to the requel of Halloween. Yes, that John Carpenter did. But yeah, I totally agree with Aaron though on just this being a breath of fresh air in a genre where it's just easy to keep doing the same thing and just make money. So definite kudos there.
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you on the same level of like rating and all. I feel like between all of his films, I feel like this one is I enjoyed it more than Us as a whole, but I feel like Get Out was just kind of like lightning in a jar kind of moment there, which again, it's like no diss on him. Like I think it's incredible just to be able to have that opportunity to happen once. But even with that said, there's still a lot to enjoy with this film, and I'm actually curious to go rewatch it myself, so I'll be sure to pick it up to whenever they probably release it on 4K, or hopefully they release it. It seems like physical media is dwindling more and more nowadays, but besides the point, I feel like it's just right in the middle of it. I will say one thing, and we could talk more about it. I feel like whenever it comes to being a horror film, and I know horror can be divisive on like, what's considered horror and not. I feel like this one is the least horrific throughout. Like, I feel like there's a lot of moments where like, I say not a lot is happening. Things are happening, but it's not like the horror vibe. But I feel like it's kind of more like whenever it does have horror, maybe it's because of the lack of horror throughout the film, but it's like almost like a pure concentrated horror at certain moments there. So I still would consider it a horror film, but it's definitely more deliberate with its horror, like on whenever he's like, okay, I'm going to have something real scary happen right here. And so that was kind of like a thing where I was like, not withdrawn, but it was definitely like, okay, yeah, it's been a while, because for a while, like, you watch the film and not a lot happens on the horror aspect. There's like looming weird incidents, but it's not like pure horror. But whenever the horror does come up, it actually kind of is a bit freaky, and I could talk more about it later. But Yeah, with that in mind, I feel like, again, characters are strong, story is strong, visuals are strong, just not super duper amazing. I'd probably put it right at a 7. I feel like maybe 7.5.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe if I rewatch it again, I could see it going up to an 8. But like first time round, from what I gathered and still digesting everything, I'm sitting comfortably at like 7.5. I'll go ahead and give it that number. But yeah, still overwhelming positive thoughts for Nope. So if you have any inkling in watching Nope, I would definitely recommend seeing it in theaters. I was actually kind of surprised that there wasn't a lot of people in our theater. I mean, granted, I know it was like a matinee on Sunday, but still, it was like opening weekend for this film, and there wasn't too many. So yeah, definitely go check out and see it. But Aaron and I are now going to talk about them spoilers. How about it?
Spoilerinos.
No, you betcha. So I feel like this time round you have a lot more stuff here. You're like, okay, I'm going to talk about this. Talk about that.
Play in my cards. Gonna put this one face down in defense mode.
Yeah, and I shall end my turn. I play Pot of Greed. It allows me to say 2 more spoilers.
That card's banned, buddy. It's too
Dang, it's not legal tourney. Darn. Anyhow, yeah, so I guess we might as well talk about the chimp in the room, maybe?
Oh, the chimp. Yeah, we could do it. Okay, so opening scene in this film is, I thought it was a dollhouse even at first because the way it was zoomed in and how unnatural it seemed, but it's a set, and there's a corpse of a young lady and a chimp just wailing away at it. And then he like kind of crawls over the couch, takes off his little birthday hat that he's on, and just is like shaking his head like, you know, just, and then it's like, nope. And that's the opening scene, you know what I mean? And we find out more about what this means later, which I thought was really interesting, that we keep going back to different angles of that.
No, I gotta be honest. I was not prepared for a bloody chimp at the beginning of the film, which is actually funny because my wife, she told me this story about how she was like freaked out by aliens whenever she was younger, but over time she's not as scared about it as she was previously. I think she said she watched Signs and that freaked her out.
Oh yeah.
But she also is terrified of chimps. Yeah, so just having a wombo combo for my wife there.
Chimps and aliens. Baby.
Yeah, got that going on. And I think she had told me, like, she was very curious on whether this was inspired by the real life events that happened, because I guess she watched this episode of Oprah where, like, this one person came on who had, like, this 200-pound chimp that was like usually friendly, but then like ripped her face off and was a survivor victim. So I don't know if like Jordan got inspiration from that whole incident.
They do talk about Oprah a lot too.
Yeah. That's the other thing she said too, and so that's major kudos to her, because I would have never guessed that in a billion years there.
Either.
But yeah, I was very thrown off by it, and I thought that it was going to come back around and be like, oh, that makes sense. But I feel like the message that they were trying to get across kind of went over my head a bit. It was like one of those things that I'm like, I feel like I missed something. So that's why I'm happy to have you here, because it seems like you, whenever you watched it and you were saying like, yeah, I got it, I was looking at you like, please tell me. Because
I don't think it's anything too crazy deep, but it's just it's what I don't know. Can you call this a braided narrative? Whenever a braided narrative in like literature or whatever is 2 separate stories that are being told at the same time, right? So you read a couple paragraphs and then you read a couple paragraphs in the next one, right? And they all have a common theme and they sort of get woven together. So I guess I consider this kind of a braided narrative where, okay, here's something that happened years and years ago, but it has nothing to do with the black family and the alien that's sucking up their horses, right? It's you know, about a traumatizing, horrific incident that happened to this dude, June, who is now running a cowboy camp, and he's like a sort of a failed child star a little bit after that, and he, you know, runs a little camp and is desperate for people to come watch his horse show, you know what I mean? What ultimately, I don't think it's anything super duper deep or mind blowing, but it's just, it shows they have those 2 braided narratives have a common theme, and that's animals losing it, you know what I mean, and going violent and going fucking goblin mode, you know what I mean, and you know, but it's the same. There is the same line of work. There was, there's chimp handling on the movie set, and then that story is being told while the horse is freaking out because it sees itself in the reflection or whatever. And then they're talking about the alien in the sky and how it's eating the horses, and then they go back to this trauma from June, right? And it's sort of like it's all clicking for not only the main character, but also June, who, even though it does not get as much screen time, has a very important role to play in the plot, as in he's why this alien is being territorial, because it's an animal, which he doesn't realize, and it's an animal going berserk because they pissed it off. They did what they weren't supposed to do. They looked it in the eye, they fed it a plastic horse, they did all these things to piss it off, and now this animal that would normally just be roaming around, presumably wherever, grabbing a horse here and there and then moving on, has set up camp in his little cloud outside of June's camp, which of course is neighboring the OJ and Emerald's family farm or whatever. And that's why it's been sitting here all this time, the past like 6 months or so, I think is the time frame, is because June thinks he's encountering an alien, and he goes out and feeds it every Friday at 6:13 or whatever the fuck, because he had a thing, and he's like that. And so he sets up this new brand new show where he's going to show people this alien because he thinks it's a spaceship that's coming down to get in the horse. But this time, whenever they finally get to the Starlight scene, it is pissed off. It comes early, and it just eats all the people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it leaves the horse alone, funny enough, which is what he was trying to, like, feed it. So, I mean, it's just a parallel, like, okay, the chimp going crazy and killing 2 actors because it snapped because there was the pops of the balloon, and it reverted to being a wild animal, is the same thing that's happening with the core plot, where, there's an animal in the sky that's territorial, and it snapped, and now it's just bloodbathing people.
Yeah, it's funny while you mentioned that, because you were on a roll, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna let you run with it.
Yeah.
I came up with like multiple bullet points there, but there's a lot to digest. But yeah, I think Jupe, whenever he is has like that connection there, because I feel like that's the interesting thing, because in the flashback, he's hiding underneath the kitchen table, just scared and afraid because a chimp just killed 2 of the actors. We never see the sister in the show until later, whenever it's revealed that she had like her face ripped off, and so she constantly has to wear a veil just to hide it. But with Jupe, there's a moment where, and they even mentioned this earlier on whenever he's talking about the show. He's like, oh yeah, that was the first fist bump explosion we did. And the chimp goes up to Jupe and sees it, and you don't know what it's going to do, but then it slowly brings its hand to do a fist bump, and you don't know what's happening. And so then as soon as Jupe's going in to meet the fist bump, what was the chimp's name? Gregory?
It was something with a G.
Something like that. Oh, good lord.
Gorby or something?
Gordy.
Yeah,
That's what it was. Yeah. Gordy is pretty much taken out by SWAT.
Yeah.
Which is pretty dadgum traumatic. So I guess that device is used to why Jupe is now thinking, oh, I was still able to reach it even though it's a raging monster.
Yeah.
Still have that connection. Yeah. And so whenever he sees that huge alien in the sky, which as we learn, it's not just a ship. It's a living creature that just is shaped kind of to look like a UFO. He's had this connection for a while, but again, because the brother and sister OJ and Emerald kind of antagonize it by throwing in that fake horse whenever it chews it up, it starts to go berserk. And let me tell you something, for the lack of horror there is, it's pretty dadgum concentrated, because I gotta be honest, that scene whenever it shows that huge alien sucking everybody up into there. Like, I was curious, like, well, what happens? Boy, did they show you what happens. It was like a huge claustrophobic kind of esophagus sort of space where people are being sucked through, screaming, and it's dark, claustrophobic, and I'm kind of a claustrophobic guy, so watching that, I was pretty unnerved. It's not like the scariest moment, but I think maybe because this film hadn't really been too scary or shocking throughout, but at this one moment, it's like, bam!
Yeah.
I was kind of very disturbed and kind of creeped out through it. And then I think, didn't it show like a horse corpse up there or something.
I couldn't tell what
yeah,
that
it
was.
was so hard to see,
fleshy
but
mass, yeah.
I feel like, again, just the screaming and the muffled, it got under my skin so much. So
and that's something that they like hinted earlier in the film, right? Because like the phenomenon first appears as like, you know, there's like little metal objects falling from the sky, and you hear this weird like kind of faint screaming noise.
yeah.
And then, you know, once you see that scene, you realize the screaming is people that have been sucked up and are getting digested, eaten, and screaming for their lives. You know what I mean? It's not the monster itself. It's the people that are slowly getting eaten.
Yeah, and I think that's actually kind of a brilliant idea from Jordan, because, you know, another start of the film is whenever OJ and OJ Sr. are hanging out, just talking about whatever. His dad is taken out by a coin that just flies through his face, and pretty much he's too damaged on the spot, and so he dies at the beginning of the film,
Right.
which then offsets the whole, like, okay, we're desperate to try to get some money going in, and so I was definitely not expecting that to happen. I remember seeing the shot in a trailer where it was quiet, but I didn't expect Keith David to die right then and there. But I feel like the way they're able to explain why the metal objects were falling from this guy is because this creature can't digest it, and they show it at the very beginning whenever Emerald puts out that fake prop horse. There, I felt like it was very brilliant just to kind of show, like, it pretty much eats everything that's organic. It spits out everything that isn't organic. So I thought that was very clever. Although it did lead to one scene that I was very shocked by. But again, I feel like visually it's just kind of like a cool thing, is whenever the alien is hovering over their house and it just starts gushing blood.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, because the alien hides out in a cloud, right? And so they're in the middle of a rainstorm, and the alien comes in, and there's just like Otis is driving back to the house and sees just this ring where the rain looks even like harder, like it's coming down even harder, and he's like looking at it, and you realize it's just like, on top of the actual rain, this monster cloud creature thing is just like, spewing blood all over their house.
Yeah, which again, visually cool just to see that, but it was definitely like, geez Louise, I think it was just Jordan Peele being like, how do I make it rain blood on a house? I felt like it was that idea, and he did it successfully. But going back to the chimp, I was worried that there was like some like prolific message there, but I feel like it's kind of like what you said. It's more of a device to kind of maybe show motivations as to why Jupe is doing what he's doing, because you could tell this moment has impacted his life if he has a whole room dedicated to merch and everything else. And obviously that's like one of his like glory day sort of pictures, because it was like that and doing the cowboy show, which is why he sets up like the whole park around it. And so whenever you hear him talk about it, like he thinks about it on a daily basis. So it's clearly kind of made him think again, like, oh, this creature that I found, I can tame it. I can handle it. And then whenever you can't, it's just kind of Jurassic Park, you know, you think you could contain something, and then it goes off the rails and then just starts going berserk everywhere. So I felt like that was very well played, and again allowed very concentrated horror moments to happen throughout, because again, like that whole scene where like the alien is like hovering over them during that rainstorm, and OJ is trying to get back to the house where Angel and Emerald are hanging out at, is very tense, and it does lead to him saying the film phrase whenever he opens the door slowly and just looks up, and then he sees that giant monster floating above him, and he just slowly closes the door and says, nope.
Nope.
Yeah.
Not doing that.
Yeah, I love his response to horror in that sense. It's just like, nah. But it's definitely makes for a much more unique film experience, because I can't really say like, oh, you know, this is kind of, I feel like I'm watching this film just with these settings. I mean, we've seen stuff like where people are trying to hunt the monster, which is what they decide to do later on once they realize like, oh, it's a big threat. And again, being able to incorporate Angel in, I feel like was a very smart way on how it was written, because again, it feels organically, because he's going out there setting up cameras. I love his introduction bit of like, that's a lot of equipment. You want to hire somebody to set it up? It's like, nah, we got it. It's like, okay, if you know what you're doing. And that also leads to another great moment, since we're in spoilers, where he just suddenly screams for no reason. He's like, sorry, I just went through a bad breakup. Had to get it out. Again, I feel like it just is naturally funny banter and moments throughout the film, and so I feel like Angel was a great comedic relief in that sense. But again, just having his smarts with the technology to kind of point out stuff that you know, these two people would have no idea about. You know, they just know, you know, OJ knows about raising horses, and then Emerald knows just about connections and trying to talk to people, because again, it's like her idea to call that one dude to film it, because he's known for like catching like rare instances on film that would be hard to film otherwise. So, and we're able to see him earlier at the commercial shoot, Antlers, so we already know he's a character. It doesn't feel like, you know, oh, I conveniently know somebody.
Right. They're introduced. And that's something I feel like the film does really strongly, not just with the characters, but with like plot devices and stuff, where they're like, they set up something so you're familiar with it, and you know, maybe it's a funny moment or a one line or whatever, and so then later on it's not a coincidence, which I feel like even just the last movie we watched just relied so much on coincidences for the plot to move along.
Oh yeah.
It's like, well, this happened, oops. So, you know, but like this one is like, okay, you can't be like, that was cheap, because like, okay, they showed us that earlier, like, oh, we should have known.
Yeah, it definitely never feels cheap, and so his inclusion is also, I feel like, really unique and interesting, because again, he's a guy that's like prepared for any scenario and able to film regardless of the situation. So having someone like him, I feel like, is great, because again, they're trying to capture footage to prove that this thing is real, because there's so many people that claim that aliens are real, but they have such botched footage that people are like, oh yeah, no, that's fake, clearly fake. And I think it's leads to a very cool climactic ending, even though I did feel like it did strain out a little bit too long at some points. And I feel like that's one of the criticisms I have of this film, is that I felt like it spent a lot of time at a lot of scenes where it's like, oh, okay, I know what's going on. Which again, it's like nothing bad. I feel like this film has like a nice trotting pace and speeds up whenever it needs to. But there was a lot of moments where I was like, okay, and because again, like, and it's not the fact that I go to horror and be like, oh, I just want the horror film, but I was kind of curious on like, where's the horror? Because even with something less of a horror genre like American Psycho, there's still like that overwhelming sense of unease throughout the film. Whereas this is more like mystery thriller sort of vibes, but definitely still had that horror going on. As I mentioned before, that claustrophobic kind of sort of ingesting scene, as well as like the blood spilling out on top of the house. Definitely I felt like were strong moments as a whole. Trying to think about other stuff to mention. I thought one of the things I liked a ton is the idea on like, okay, if we're going to film this thing, how are we going to know where it's at if we can never see it? And so those waving, inflatable, flailing arm, flailing tube mans, that we see at the beginning of the film and that they steal later, I thought was a brilliant idea. So that way, whenever they go down, because whenever this alien goes near electronic objects, it just shuts off completely, which is why, again, we're able to mention with the music, like the music kind of slows down a bit whenever it's approaching closer, and then like turns off completely whenever it's right there. So having those waving, inflatable, flailing arm, flailing tube mans all across the field just makes for a very visually interesting shot, as well as a great plot device.
Yeah, which is awesome, because I mean, I do feel like a lot of, especially modern movies where you can get really creative with scenery and, you know, green screen tech and all that. A lot of people trying to make a very visually interesting scene, but then it doesn't really make that much sense in the context of like, it's like, we just ran to this area and now we're in this area because it looks pretty, and it's like, whatever. But like, yeah, stuff like that is like, okay, that's an awesome shot on this really cool piece of California, these like hilly ranch lands, and it totally makes sense for them to set up all these wacky inflatable tube men, because they're like, this is our idea of how to see where the alien is, you know?
No, I feel like it's very grounded in reality. It's not like, you know, MacGyvering some impossible way to do it. It's like even Antlers, whenever he has like, I have a camera that's like manual, he cranks it, doesn't need power, and he's able to get everything he needs to see. I will say though, there is like a lot of moments that is kind of like, I'm not sure how to feel about it. One of them it involves our boy Antlers, where
this is one of my criticisms.
Yes,
too.
that was mine too. So pretty much after, like, it seems like, yep, we got the shot we need to, works out great. There's this moment where Antlers gets up and he talks about, I can't remember exactly the words he said, but he's like, nobody deserves to see this miracle shot or something along those lines.
So whenever Emerald first calls him, he's like, "We're looking for the impossible shot" or whatever, and that's like they don't even say an alien or whatever. He's like, "What you're seeking, man shouldn't find" or something. And then later he agrees to go do this because he has some larger element of proof or whatever, where the cloud's sitting still in the sky, and he's like, "Oh, well, you're not so totally full of shit. Yeah, let's do this. Let's get the shot." And then for some reason he just reverts back to that original position at the end, where once he gets the shot, he's like, yeah, there's some, like, the man is not ready for the impossible shot or some stupid shit. And then he goes and gets eaten by the alien while filming it all.
Like, I don't understand his line of thinking, because, again, it makes sense on what he decides to do, because he hears this idea and he's like, whatever. And then he hears about what happened at the Jupe amusement park, where it's like 40 people went missing. We don't know what happened. And so he knows they're close by. And so he's like, fine, I'll do it. And so it makes sense to include him. But then as soon as he says that, and then decides to run off and film the creature, and then get sucked in, my only guess as to why Antlers would do that is to get the shot and hope that the film survives as it's spit out. That's about the only thing.
But the biggest plot hole to me is, like, this is a film professional whose entire career, that according to us, the audience, has been centered around getting shots that are really hard to get, right? And he doesn't think to just take out that film reel and put a new one in, right? Because they've already showed that earlier. That was one of the weird conflicts that didn't really feel that conflicting to me, where they were like, oh, we ran out of film right before the monster's gonna go, we have to switch it and we're not gonna get it on camera or whatever.
Yeah.
They do that and then they get it on camera and it's like, okay, conflict resolved. Like, the movie could have ended there and it would have been a weird place to end it, but that's where, but he just needed to rev up the conflict again. So he just like runs out there with the camera. Why didn't you leave that film reel, put a new one in, and then go try to get the new shot? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, my only guess is, like, people that are obsessed with something, like, get this great idea, like, oh, I will get the shot nobody could ever possibly get. Being eaten alive by this huge, unidentified alien in the sky. But even then, like, maybe if they had shown him being, like, more depressed or something, that makes sense. Because that's what my wife said, is like, well, maybe he was depressed. And I was like, you're right. She's like, he didn't look too happy looking at all the footage he had.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
he didn't seem like that happy of a guy, but...
But, yeah, and there was... he did a lot of weird moments. Like, whenever he starts reciting the lyrics to One-Eyed, One-Horned, Flying Purple People Eater,
Yeah.
I feel like, again, it's like one of those things, like, okay, it's like cool, like, trailer bait, I feel.
It was like, that was one of those moments that was funny whenever he recited the first lyric.
Yeah.
And then he just kept going. And it wasn't even like, he didn't even go to such a point that it became absurd and funny. It was just like right before that point for me. And so I was like, why did you keep saying the lyrics? Stop.
Yeah, definitely the case. One thing I will point out, that was also another thing that I'm like, okay, like, what's going on is, again, kind of like the monster reveal, like, once we see it, it's one of those things that I feel like there's at some points, like, because at first you see it, it looks like just like a flying hat, which again, I know that's like a UFO, but I mean, there's even like the hole to make it look more like a hat. So I imagined it as a giant cowboy hat.
Me too. Yeah.
And so it just kind of takes away the horror of it. But whenever it unravels itself, it becomes more like H.P. Geiger, or like sort of alien sort of looking thing.
Almost angelic, really. Yeah, just these big fluttery wings, and I
feel like visually it's cool. I don't know like how scared it is. I mean, granted, if I was there, it'd still be scary, you know, it's like a killer doll.
Yeah.
You know, but just the level of scary. But I will say there was the one moment whenever everything's hit the fan, you know, Antlers gets sucked up, Angel's out of commission because fortunately he's able to wrap himself in barbed wire, which again, it's made out of metal, so it just spits him back out by coincidence because he wraps himself up in it with a tarp. He's out of the film, still alive, but just out of the film. And then it's like Emerald trying to run to the TMZ
his bike.
Which the TMZ thing was one of those things that I was like, that's one of those things that did feel a little shoehorned in. Like, because it made sense to me, and I kind of liked the dude and the character design and everything, but I feel like if I was supposed to feel conflict from him showing up there, I didn't, because he just, like, kind of rolled in, was like, I'm gonna trespass anyways, and then dies. And it's like, okay, well, that didn't really interrupt the filming at all, which is what they were going for. But
yeah, I felt like he was more of a vehicle for Emerald to be able to get out.
Literally a vehicle. He was an electronic bike.
Yes, I will say this. Let me see. I had to type up this picture here. I will say that his design, I feel like, was also heavily inspired by The Day the Earth Stood Still, which is like an alien film. So I saw this and I immediately thought of that, and I'm like, okay, that just can't be coincidence.
He's
I feel like that's a...
He's got like a full mirrored helmet with like one little eye hole. I don't know. I feel like it was supposed to look like a big eyeball. You know what I mean? Which is what one of the themes of this film is looking.
And I thought that was I felt like that was a little more inorganic, like as film flow, but it was one I was like, okay, I guess I'll allow it. You know, like, it's a thing. TMZ reporter comes up because he's like, oh, there's this person's place nearby, perhaps they have answers on what's going on, but yeah, I feel like it's definitely just serves more as a way for Emerald to escape. This is another thing that I'm like, I don't know where to put this, but I have to mention it. The one thing I love about OJ whenever he's setting this all up as well is his uniform. Is the Scorpion King hoodie that he got, because that was like his first film he worked on with his dad whenever it came to the horses, which I think he even said like they ended up using camels. So I thought just that throwaway line, I'm like, okay, that's really funny. I enjoy that. But I will say, like, I understand OJ's line of thinking of, I'm going to distract the alien so that way Emerald can get out. And while I understand, I feel like he stood way closer than what he needed to. I felt like the alien already had attention on him, but just him standing still, which again, I know they did it as a dramatic, like, oh, did he make it or did he not make it? And so we don't figure out till like the end of the film, which I am glad they revealed, because in all honesty, I was kind of expecting to be like, no one knows the film ends, because I feel like a lot of films do that and you never get a concise answer sometimes.
But that's one thing that I will say, because I mentioned earlier that Jordan Peele tends to like not leave things to a mystery, you know. And I feel like the same way there's the mystery of obviously like, okay, well, what the fuck is this giant alien in the sky still do it? Like, what was it there in the first place? And he doesn't answer that, you know. He doesn't answer the whole history, but he resolves all this. There's never just like a, ooh, what if, you know, at the end, you know, but whose phone, you know, at the end, at the end of any of his movies, he's like, no, conflict resolved, like, every time. But
which I think definitely is a much bigger thing to do, because I feel like having like a mystery ending is both, it can be powerful, but it can also be absolutely lame and weak. And so I feel like with the way this film ends, I felt like it just wrapped it up nicely, I feel like. But yeah, so that was just one of the things I was like, okay, are they really doing this? And so whenever she does make it back over to Jupe's amusement park and sees the well there, which I think again is like an ingenious idea, because we see the well at the beginning and what it does, and the fact that it takes pictures.
And it's hand cranked. It's a hand cranked photo thing. So they're like, okay, it doesn't use electronics.
So that's the other thing. And then the third thing, there's coins everywhere because this alien can't ingest anything that's inorganic. So I feel like it's less coincidental, and instead the pieces falling into place to allow this moment. But again, I am very surprised that on Emerald's mind is, I gotta get this picture somehow, as opposed to me, I'd be thinking run.
Right. Well, yeah. I think she's just had a little bit of ingenuity there, because I feel like she knew that the monster was going to be distracted by something else, because when she initially got to that park, she like let all the flags on that was holding down that balloon up, or so I had this big balloon that was covered in flags, and she was like, okay, I know the monster's gonna be pissed off about that, because that's one thing they learned, is that she really hates the flags now after they ate the horse that was covered in flags or whatever. So she's like, okay, the attention's off me now, I can get this photo, right? She's like, I'm gonna see this through to the end. Which is cool because I think one of the themes, and that's how you see her grow as a character. Because I think one of the themes throughout her character in the movie is like, I don't want to do any work. Like, that's up to you.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, doesn't see things through to the end. You know, even her first big scene is she shows up to do the safety thing. She's like, whatever. She does the basic talk. She plugs it. And then she goes and she's talking to some guy over there. And the horse freaks out and kicks someone when she was supposed to be there to keep the safety going or whatever. To do horse handling. So, like, yeah, by the end, she's like, okay, I'm going to see this through to the end. And it shows the final, you know, she's grown as a person.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation because she even says at the beginning of the film, whenever she tags along with OJ, whenever he's going to sell Lucky to Jupe, OJ mentions his grievance with the fact that whenever they did have that one job and OJ needed her help to try to like talk people away because they were just not leaving the horse alone. And again, he's not like well spoken to where he's able to talk to people and just be as loud and attentive as Emerald is. And he complains about it. And he's like, why would you mention your side gig? And she's like, no. You don't understand. That's not my side gig. This horse thing is my side gig.
Right.
And so seeing that sort of commitment there, I think is definitely a great observation.
Right. And even you can see it whenever she takes on the mantle of like, I'll distract the alien in the sky so that OJ can get away. And OJ's like, no, I'll distract the alien in the sky so that you can get away. And she does end up conceding that to him, but she's like, okay, well, I got to save the day somehow now. So you can see her finally, you know, taking responsibility where she was not beforehand, and that's sort of her growth.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good moment. One thing I will say, actually, and this is kind of, I don't know, it's a criticism, I guess, but not like a big, like, oh, ruined the whole film criticism, but how OJ is able to figure out not to look at the creature in the eye when it doesn't necessarily have a visible eye, I was definitely kind of confused by, because I know they show it at the beginning of like, no, don't show the reflection to the animal, which I guess like the horses don't like the reflection. The chimp at the beginning didn't like the balloons popping, and so just being able to correlate like, oh, this thing doesn't want me to look at it in the eye, that would have never crossed my mind of don't look at it, put 2 to 2 together. So I felt like that was a little too coincidental, I think.
I could see that. Yeah, I thought they did an okay job of explaining that, just because they did show that flashback right before he, you know, realized or whatever. Whenever he tells them, he's like, don't look him in the eye, you know, whenever they put the mirror up to his head or whatever. And so like he's like, okay, I think at that point he had realized, okay, this is an animal first, and then he realized his whole background is in animal handling, and so he was like, it has to have something. And so I feel like it's just something he tried, you know what I mean? He's like, I'm not going to look at it. He's like, I am not looking, respectfully, you know? And it just like, I feel like it worked in a moment of stress or whatever. And he was like, okay, cool. Like that works. I think that, and then you can even tell he doesn't completely buy it until they're all eating fish fry together or whatever. And he's like, I think it won't attack you if you look at it. And they're like, whoa, way to kill the vibe, man. But
I think that's also a wonderful like thought process on that. So I'm glad you're able to see it that way. For me at the moment, I was just like, oh, that seems a little too, not super Deus Ex Machina, but like Deus Ex Machina light, just coincidentally. But I mean, I had another thought, but my brain just totally went gone. Let's see if I could think of it. Oh boy. Let's see. Trying to think. It had.
Well, something. I mean, we talked a little bit about because I feel like the two characters that get developed the most are obviously the two main ones is Emerald and OJ. We talked about how Emerald evolved as a character. I thought it was interesting that OJ also sort of evolved. I think his was a little more subtle, but what he couldn't do at the beginning was be assertive, take charge, and keep people safe from the animals, which was his job. He wasn't doing his job correctly. And by the end, he's like, okay, I could save people. And that was his whole deal on the horse. Like, I'm going to be the one that diverts it away from both the camera crew whenever they're filming and from my sister. And then at the end, he's sort of the cowboy at the end of the Western, and they show that shot of him under
that was such a good shot.
Right,
to like...
which of course goes back to the very first part of the movie where they're talking about, like, it was a black jockey on a horse was the first film star, but why are we not getting, why does nobody remember that jockey's name, but we all remember the father of modern cinemaphotography's name, you know what I mean? And so it's sort of like this sense of like, all right, the black cowboy isn't ever the hero, you know. And that's sort of that race relations theme that's lightly buried into this movie, not as overtly as something like Get Out, but that's like at the underscore. There's even a line that Emerald has whenever they're at Jupe's place, and she's like, that she sees, he's like, oh, you were in that cowboy show or whatever. He's like, yeah, and then she's like, she's like, oh, that black cowboy too. They're like, whatever happened to him or whatever.
Oh my gosh.
She mentions that. So
oh my gosh, that is such a man.
So then
I heard that, but it didn't even register. That's great.
And you can see OJ was just like dismissing her, like shut up, Emerald. Like, we're trying to do business. You know what I mean? Like, stop dragging this stuff up. But like, yeah, that ends up being one of the cooler through lines in the movie. Is at the end you get, you know, the Sunshot Western shot with OJ as the cowboy hero, you know.
No, and I thought that was great bit at the end. And one thing I also like a ton is that whenever they do mention like the jockey on the horse, she says it so eloquently, and I thought it was well composed, and I'm like, man, you know, that's great on the spot. And then like she plays a tape later, and it's Keith David doing the exact same narration that she was doing
they're
earlier.
Just taken after their father, right? Which is one of the other themes in this is legacy. Obviously, I mean, you have the whole thing is like they're struggling to keep this farm alive and stuff, and they're living in the shadow of their father that died from this incident. This traumatic incident they lived through. And then Jupe's also dealing with the legacy as a child star and the traumatic incident he went through that destroyed his career, that now he's doing this horse film or whatever. So those are sort of like the minor themes that are playing in the background of this blockbuster monster movie. But is the thought of legacy, you know. We used to be, we were the first star in Hollywood, really, when you think about it, and now we're struggling to make ends meet. Our family is, you know. But then at the end, they get that heroic moment.
No, I thought it was a great reunion. And again, like, it's one of those things that whenever OJ does disappear, it's not guaranteed if he lived or not. Like, it's pretty much left up. Like, you hear a winning of a horse and, like, air being sucked up. And whenever Emerald is, like, putting in multiple coins, be like, come on, grab the balloon, and trying to get that perfect shot. And then whenever the balloon pops, do you feel like the alien was killed or just incapacitated? It's very left open-ended.
It is left a little, because they don't show its corpse or anything, but it does look like it's like fallen from the sky.
Yeah, and damaged a bit.
I feel like it's dead. I feel like that's what you're supposed to take away from it.
And so then she like feels relieved because she feels like she's incapacitated the creature. Crews coming up, like news reporters, because they've been reporting on this disappearance going on at Jupe's place. And then whenever it has like the rolling dust settling down, and the Western music was playing towards the end, right?
I'm pretty sure
and
it was,
shows like OJ, and you don't get to see like a clear shot of him. You just see the silhouette of a black horse and a man wearing an orange hoodie, and so you just know like, okay, he lived. It didn't have to be like the sappy reunion where they hug each other, embrace. It's so stupid, but I was a little stressed in the fact that, you know, all these pictures are popping out because it's self-developing pictures, and it's showing like, nope, nothing, just a balloon. And it shows like that final photo getting developed. I honestly was expecting they don't see it at all.
The sun was in the way.
Yeah, sun is too bright. Yeah, I honestly thought it was going to be something like that, and so I was like, oh man, don't do this. So then once I see the alien, I'm like, oh, okay, that's a nice ending.
Yeah.
But by the way, that I finally remembered what I was going to mention.
Nice.
And again, I would say this is a criticism, but it's not like a heavy criticism. I think it's more of a really, really funny, weird observation. But one of the things, then this is like even before we see the movie, we're all grabbing concessions at the concession stand, and we're looking up, and I think it was either you or my wife that said like, hey, they have like nope cups. And I'm like, what do you mean they have nope cups? And so anyways, they're promoting these icy cups that just has like the icy polar bear on there, and it says like, whenever it has cold, it turns blue and red. And so I'm like, that's really stupid. I'll take one.
Yeah.
yeah. And so I got it for my wife. And so I'm like, why is this a thing?
Yeah.
Like, why is there an icy Nope cup?
Right, yeah.
And then we're watching the movie, and it gets to the point whenever Jupe is putting on his show where he feeds a horse to the monster in the sky, and it just focuses for a very long time a huge icy shack there in the stands.
One of the flavors was cactus. I really want to try cactus ice.
Oh yeah, me too. So I saw that, and it was just like, it just felt like blatant product placement, which again, it's nothing new in films. Even Sonic the Hedgehog has a joke where they keep mentioning Olive Garden. Because in the first film, they mentioned it so much that pretty much the one character that kept bringing it up kept mentioning it in the sequel.
Where you hear your family.
But
the whole movie's also at like a Chevy truck commercial. If you notice, just
oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that, bro. Oh my gosh. I guess the icy just stuck out more to me because if it's
Sonic, and in Sonic the Hedgehog, it's a fucking the second one they show like shiny new Chevy trucks so often, like the ending baseball scene where they all have the ice chest.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that.
There's so many.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. Which. Again, product placement isn't necessarily like, if there's product placement, I'm out. I am taken out. But I was taken out of the film because I'm like...
I do think it was in the funniest place possible, though. I feel like Jordan Peele was like, all right, we need fun in this movie, like, we need to front load some budget here a little bit. Let's get a sponsorship. And he's like, I really don't want to do this. But he's like, all right, I got an idea. And he puts it at the part where like there's a large human massacre. So like he's like, haha, now the audience will associate... ices with the deaths of dozens of people.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't blood on the house; it was red icy.
Dark cherry icy.
Yeah, but I feel like if he had to place a product, I felt like this was the most appropriate place at a theme park because we're just constantly surrounded by it. So. Kudos to at least product placement. It's not like OJ drinking from an icy cup.
A Coca-Cola with the logo turned towards the camera,
Yeah, exactly. Makes you feel like you're watching that Wayne's World skit.
Refreshing.
So that's one thing I was going to mention. It just threw me out of it, and I just started laughing so hard looking at it.
One thing that would have made it better is if someone was slurping on an icy with the logo facing the camera, and someone else was like, can I have a taste of your icy? And they go, nope, and then winks at the camera. That would have really sold it for me.
I think people would have walked out of the theater after that. They'd be like, Jordan Peele finally flops. Worst piece of film ever created.
Yeah, I guess that's why they don't keep me in the writing room. But...
I mean, to be fair, I thought it was beautifully put.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that was one of the things. I will actually mention the fake out they have at the beginning of the film.
You talking about in the horse stables?
Yes, the horse stables.
I wanted to talk about this. Yeah.
That was such a funny thing
which is funny because that's one of the more genuinely scary parts of the film. That whole sequence was like, oh shit, this is where this movie's going, and I was like, oh. Fuck, it's creeping me out. Like, I was on the edge of my seat, but it was just kids in costumes.
Because there's, like, by this point in the film, there's already lots of hint that, okay, this is, like, a supernatural phenomenon, you know, something otherworldly here.
Right.
Points to aliens, because I think is this after they install the cameras?
Yeah, this is after they install the cameras, and they don't get anything that first night or whatever.
Yeah, because of the praying mantis, which I thought was one of the aliens there, but... No, it just happened to be there and happened to leave there. So I don't know, like, that's one of those things that's also kind of like, that seems a little too convenient.
Right, which I don't, like, it was just sort of weird because the other camera went down. And then during that whole ending sequence in the day when they're fighting the alien, apparently all the electronics over a huge swath of area was down whenever it was, like, in its final form or whatever. So, like, you feel like it would be able to shut down both cameras if one of them was out. But, whatever.
Yeah, it's whatever. But that horse stable scene... I that was kind of the first scare I had. I mean, again, I didn't like jump out of the seat, but it was definitely creepy the way they had it because there's like these little creatures running around. I'm like, and they're hidden in shadows. So I'm like, what do these things look like? And so then,
and they move creepy and slowly, and I was like, holy shit! But
and so then, like, there's that one scene. Again, I think that this actually might be the first instance that OJ says nope.
Yeah. Because he sees one because the lights are on in the stable, and so he like goes in and he turns the lights off and he starts walking back, and then they flip the lights back on, and he's like, and he sees one of them. He sees one of these little alien creatures like just peeking around the corner, and he starts shifting all weird, and they're like, "Oh fuck!" And so he starts kind of walking towards it, and then he sees another one pop out of the office that's in front of the light switch, and he just like is like, "Nope."
And then he turns away, but his instinct is, "I got to get this on camera," and just the way the alien super slowly peeks its head slowly around the corner there. I thought was hysterical, and then it's revealed later on, like, these aliens aren't aliens. They're Jupe's kids that happen to be there. Because we see them later in the film dressed up as the aliens.
Right. They were there because Emerald stole that plastic horse from Jupe. And so they were, like, pranking them back is what they thought they were doing. But I thought it was really funny that... So, like, in one of the horse stalls that was behind them or whatever, like, the third alien kid pops up, and she just punches him in the face. And, like, the mask falls off, and they all, like, skitter off. And I just thought it was funny that he decked a kid in the face.
Yeah. It's one of those things that the scare that was there, it didn't feel cheap.
No. Yeah.
So I think that's really hard for most horror films, is to feel like, okay, I felt like that was well placed.
And honestly, I thought one of the horses was going to be the jump scare. Because, because the horses had been freaking out whenever these aliens were around, right? And the film had already established the theme of, like... animals go in goblin mode, like things that set off the violent tendencies in animals. So I thought, like, he was gonna, like, be scared and back up to a fucking stall, and a horse was gonna, like, ram it or something. Like, I thought that was gonna be the jump scare, which was gonna get me, because I find horses kind of scary, to be honest with you. Not, like, in a sense where, like, I can't walk through some stables or, like, pet a horse or let it eat out of my hand, because I'm cool with all that. But I don't want to be, like, near horses, especially not near, like, the sides or backs of them for prolonged periods of time, because they're just giant fucking muscular things that, if they were to snap, could kick you in the face and kill you. So, like, and that happens all the time. So it's one of those things where I'm just like, I'm not, like, actively scared of horses, but, like, they're kind of freakishly large and muscular and could just kill us if they wanted to.
That is kind of weird to think about, because, again, you don't think, like, you think lion ferocious, but you never hear too much about all the stories that exist of, like, people getting brutally injured or killed by like a horse, and just the sheer power they have behind their kick. So
or tramples, yeah. I mean, horses will just go wild and trample something, just like a dog will go wild and kill a kid or whatever. But we still have them in our house. But.
Yeah, and that was the interesting thing, because I thought, like, the story of the chimp was the fact of, like, giving hints that the alien's always been around, and somehow it manipulates the animals, because that's one of the things that all the animals start wigging out whenever it's nearby.
Right.
And so that's why I also thought the praying mantis was kind of like, oh, the alien's, like, controlling it.
Yeah, I was kind of in the same wavelength. Yeah, but it just turns out that I feel like they were just doing that, like, sort of, sometimes animals sense danger before humans can. So the horses are freaking out because there's an alien here and they're just running away because they don't want to get eaten.
Yeah.
But...
So, like, and it's not the fact that I'm like, oh, I would rather have that than the explanation. I just feel like it was a little misleading.
Yeah,
is the only thing. So
I was fine with it though, because I mean, that's kind of the mysteries where they throw you things where you're like, holy shit, is it this? Is it this? And then whenever you find out, you're like, okay, like, did you put it together or not? But
yeah, no, definitely. But yeah, aside from all that stuff, was there any other, like, pros and cons you felt like you needed to mention about Nope?
I just had two more things I wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
One is pretty quick, but I thought the structure of the film was actually interesting. And I brought up braided narratives, but I think, like, literally they had title cards to separate each segment of the film. And the title cards were each named after an animal, which I thought was cool, because it kind of set up, like, the importance of animals in their... Because, like, the first one was, like, Ghost or whatever, the horse that ran off, and then it was, like, Lucky or whatever, and then it was Gordy, and then the last one was Jean Jacket, which was the original horse that they had, but they named the big monster in the sky Jean Jacket too.
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting that they divided up the film in parts for you like that, and even had one dedicated to Gordy. So it was like, it shows that it was a woven together narrative. I just thought that was an interesting way to tell a story.
Yeah, I think it's really cool, because, again, I was kind of surprised whenever it started throwing title cards, because it kind of reminded me of, like, The Shining whenever it showed, like, what day it is, even though it doesn't necessarily have like the biggest performance. Like, okay, on Wednesdays, you know, we wear pink or whatever.
Right.
It's nothing like that. I feel like with these title cards, I do think they had more significance behind it, and kind of discovering like why each section of the film was named that. So I think that's definitely a very interested aspect of the film there, and so that's going to make it a little bit more curious for me whenever I go back and rewatch this film, because I definitely
know what's coming ahead now. It's like, okay, this is Ghost's story.
Yeah, really, I just need to go back and rewatch like all 3 of his films, because it's been a while there, and again, like might get around to like watching Get Out or Us sometime soon there. I'd be curious to kind of dive more into that, but yeah, that's definitely an interesting aspect. Was there
the only other thing I wanted to mention was just, I guess my only criticism, and this is my criticism I have for most monster movies, so I'm not surprised they didn't surpass this. I give this movie a lot of points for creativity. But at the same time, once the monster's revealed and it's in the middle of the daytime, it's really not scary at all, is it?
No, it just looks like a giant... Again, it first looked like a giant cowboy hat, then it looked like just like a sheet. It did remind me of like those abstract kind of jellyfish drawings that people do. But yeah, it was one of those things I was like, yeah, sure, it's like menacing, but I wasn't like deeply afraid of it. It's not going to be haunting me in my sleep.
And even when it was like sucking people up, with the exception of like showing them getting grinded up in the inside, it really wasn't that scary.
No, because it would flash like those green things, you know, kind of showing like, okay, I'm gonna get you. And they show like that box in a lot of the film, like even the opening like credits shows like that box, and you're not sure exactly what it is you're in. Right. So I mean, I feel like for the creature as a whole, it's fine. I'd probably say nothing to where I'm like, oh man, the monster in this movie is great, which again, that's like kind of the hard trade-offs horror has to make sometimes. I feel like a lot of times they make a really enticing cool monster and then everything else starts to falter, or they have like a really cool cast and then the monster itself is just but yeah, I would definitely agree. As much as I love Jordan Peele as a director and a horror creator, I don't think this is quite the same level of like, that's the one thing I will give Us, like just the red jumpsuit, the golden scissors, and just the way they talk. I felt like the monster was more compelling than the rest of the story. I felt like that was the strongest thing, and so this one I feel like has to make the sacrifice of, even though there are cool visual stuffs, like again, I love that, you know, tan brown pasture with all the colorful waving inflatable flailing arm flailing tube bands. Aside from that, the monster itself is pretty
I do think they did the best they could with the core monster that they had in mind, and it was a really, like, I give them again prompts for trying that, because like, but I just can't imagine making a film in 2022 where the monster is big sky animal that eats things, you know, and like making that actually scary. So you know, like it just wasn't that scary once you found out what it was. But
I think it definitely fits the build of being something that is like not from this earth. Like it feels like, again, like the only times is, again, whenever it takes its shape closer to a UFO, even though it looks like a hat.
Right.
But a lot of the moments where it is kind of like an abstract piece of art you're looking at. So I will give credit to that, because they could have made it just like generic space creature, you know, number 55.
Right.
So I will give props to that, but because it's just kind of so abstract, I feel like it's just not quite as iconic as other shots in the film are.
Sure.
So yeah, I definitely agree with that bullet point as well. And
but that's all I got.
I don't really have too much either. I feel like, again, I've exhausted a lot of the bullet points. I feel like there's been a lot to take away from this film, and even though we did kind of get pretty nitpicky towards aspects of this film, I still thought it was a great time. I honestly just enjoyed it, and it makes me excited to see like where Jordan Peele goes from here, because again, I'm kind of excited that this film didn't feel like, you know, there's like a lot of directors like man, this is hard to say, like Tarantino, you could tell it's a Tarantino film.
Yeah, they have a...
and I feel like it's both a benefit and a problem, I feel. And so with Jordan, like, I feel like I watch this film and it's not like, oh, this is Jordan Peele all over. You know, I feel like, again, it's just definitely very refreshing that I feel like he's going to keep making films, and it's not going to be, it's like that one person that knows like one cool trick, and it's like you see it first time, you're like, whoa, that was insane. It's like, yeah, thanks. Yeah, check out this next trick, blue steel. You know, it's like the same thing. You're like, yeah, can you do anything else? Yes. You know, you just did the same thing.
Right.
So it's very refreshing to see like Jordan Peele still staying highly creative with his work, and so it does make me eager to watch his future films and see kind of where he goes from there. So yeah, I still definitely recommend this film to people to go out and watch it. Again, like, support this kind of media, because I feel like this is kind of, Jordan Peele is one of the key creators that I feel like is helping keep the horror genre
fresh.
Fresh and diverse. Definitely, just to help kind of spread the genre as a whole, as opposed to just being like regular, just, yep, it's the same horror movie I've watched 50,000 times.
Yeah.
So yeah. So that was our review of Nope. So like we said, check it out. And now we're going to get to them teasers. How about it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so keeping in line of how we've been bobbing back and forth from first installment or original films to sequels, you'll never guess what we're watching next.
Alien 2.
Close but no cigar. Let's keep this more grounded.
Okay, grounded.
Yes, and it focuses on actually what I believe to be one of your favorite slashers.
Oh.
Yes, we're heading back to school with this film for sure.
Back to school? Is it Scream 2?
Ooh, cool. Closer. It's actually from a different franchise that was helmed by the same director. Although this film, I don't think has anything to do with this director. So same director as the first Scream. For this first installment.
What was the other one he did? I know we watched it. Before we watched Scream.
You know, he kind of wears a cowboy hat, kind of. A different hat.
Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Yep. That's going to be the next film for you. Yeah. So we're going to be checking out that film next time. So thank you all so much for listening to this episode of Poppin the Scary, and we'll see y'all again next time when we're Poppin the Scary with The Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2.
Woo!
Woo!
Zoinks!
It does. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube, Castbox, or iTunes platforms to stay up to date when new episodes drop. To see what Aaron and I are up to, check out our respective Twitter accounts. For me, it is @ColeKirkVA, and for Aaron, it is @AnimalGameDev. Thank you all so much for listening to our podcast. We'll speak to you all again next time when we're Poppin the Scary.